The X-T30 arrived on the scene just 6 months after the flagship Fujifilm X-T3 and brings with it many of that camera's advanced specifications and features, but for hundreds of dollars less. At about $900 for the body only, the X-T30 may leave some X-T3 customers wondering what they paid $1,500 for. Steve Jobs once famously said, "If you don't cannibalize yourself, someone else will." This was, of course, in reference to the introduction of the iPhone and how that would affect sales of the iPod. But it proved to be a tremendously important move for Apple. The topic of product cannibalization comes up a lot in the camera world as well, and not just because iPhones have gobbled up all the point-and-shoot sales. Some camera companies, like Canon, choose to avoid cannibalizing their products at all possible costs. Fujifilm, however, doesn't seem to be so afraid of it, and that is very evident in this new X-T30. And it's that lack of concern over cannibalizing the X-T3 that has made the X-T30 such a good camera. In fact, I might argue this is actually two cameras in one. It's a great entry point into the Fuji X series for beginners and enthusiasts alike, but it's also a fantastic second camera for pros already shooting with the X-T3. On one hand, it has a simplified control layout complete with the auto mode switch that makes it a little more approachable to new photographers. But on the other, it has the same sensor, processor, and autofocus system as the X-T3. Not only does that mean image quality is identical, but the camera is also nearly as fast and even offers very similar 4K video specifications. So if you bought an X-T3 6 months ago, did you make a mistake? Well, no, I don't think you did. But if you bought two X-T3s, but really, there are reasons that camera demands its higher price, and Fujifilm was able to sell this one for so much less. The X-T30 is smaller, lighter, and simpler than the X-T3, which makes it better for some photographers, but worse for others. The body isn't weather sealed, there's no dedicated ISO dial, and none of the dials lock. It has a smaller, lower resolution viewfinder with 2.36 million dots. The screen tilts up and down, but not out to one side like the X-T3's. And you get a single SD card slot rather than two. You do get an autofocus joystick now, but it comes as a replacement rather than an addition to the directional buttons on the X-T20, whereas the X-T3 features both of those controls. You can use touchscreen gestures to regain some of that functionality, which is certainly a nice thought, but I would still prefer having the physical buttons. It also just doesn't feel as good as the larger X-T3. The grip is too small, the AF joystick is too low, and moving the Q button to the thumb rest just kind of made it harder to reach. Despite having equal tech inside of it, the camera simply does not inspire confidence the way the X-T3 does. To be clear, this really isn't a knock against the X-T30. This is a smaller, lighter, cheaper camera, so some ergonomic compromises are expected. But it is the reason why some photographers should still shell out the extra cash for the X-T3. But when it comes down to results, you hardly give up anything by going with the X-T30. Image quality from the 26 megapixel X-Trans sensor is every bit as good as on the X-T3, as is the 425-point autofocus system that now features improved face and eye detection, and it works really well. When it comes to speed, the X-T30 can shoot at 8 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, which is a bit slower than the X-T3's 11 frames per second. But with the electronic shutter, you can shoot at 20 frames per second or 30 with a 1.25x crop, which are the same numbers as what you get from the X-T3. Now there is a downside, and that's to do with the size of the memory buffer in the camera. So in my testing, I got 18 raw photos in a single burst, which exactly matched the manufacturer's spec. But what that means is that if you're shooting at 20 or 30 frames per second, you're going to get well under 1 second of continuous high-speed shooting if you're shooting in RAW. So I would recommend, if you want to use those higher speed modes, probably a good idea to stick with JPEGs. Also, as with every Fujifilm camera save the X-H1, the X-T30 does not have in-body image stabilization. And to be fair, neither does the Sony A6400, which is probably the closest competitor. But it's still one of those things that I would really like to see on a camera at this level. In-body stabilization makes Fuji's fast primes, nearly all of which are not optically stabilized, much more useful, particularly in video mode. And this is a camera that actually boasts some very impressive video features for the class. In fact, it's much better than the X-T2 that I'm shooting on right now. So let's swap in the X-T30 and you can see what that looks like. So a couple of things. The X-T30 does not crop in 4K mode the way the X-T2 and X-T20 do. So I've moved the camera closer a little bit to reestablish the same framing that I had. And that should have the effect of lowering the depth of field, so you should get a little more separation between the subject, me in this case, and the background. And that's a look that a lot of people are going to prefer. It's maybe a little more cinematic. The other thing is that we now have face and eye detection autofocus in video mode, which means I can step over here and hopefully the camera is still focused on me and didn't just shift to the background, which would have happened with my X-T2. But one thing I did just notice, and I honestly just noticed this right now, is that the tripod mount is not centered with the lens, which is super annoying. I know it's a small thing, but it's really kind of an annoyance. But anyway, it's a little bit off center, and I guess that's just something you're going to have to live with. For the still-only photographers out there, I apologize for all the gibberish I'm about to spout, but this is important stuff because the X-T30 is actually one of the best video cameras in this class. Internally, it can record 8-bit 4K at 24 or 30 frames per second at a bit rate of up to 200 megabits per second. Now that's not quite the 10-bit 400 megabit per second video we get out of the X-T3, but it is very good for a $900 camera, and again, better than the X-T2 and X-T20 before it. Even more, if you connect it to an external recorder, as I'm doing right now with an Atomos recorder, you can get 10-bit 422 video out of it, which means better gradations, better color resolution, and that is equal to what the X-T3 can do. You still don't get that camera's 4K 60 frames per second option, but that's really it. The image quality is basically the same. And what this means is that the X-T30 is a perfect B camera for X-T3 owners. And at just 13.5 ounces, it's also a good fit for small gimbals, which gets you around the lack of in-body stabilization. One other small touch for video that I really like is that you have dual tally lamps, both on the front and back of the camera. So it actually uses the autofocus lamp on front of the camera as a tally lamp and the memory card status light on the back of the camera as a rear tally lamp. So both you as the operator and your talent can see when the camera is recording. You can, of course, turn both those things off in the menu. So for both stills and video, the X-T30 is a really great little camera. But how does it compare to the Sony A6400? Well, the Sony does have some advanced technology under the hood. Primarily, it has that real-time tracking autofocus, which is just absolutely excellent for shooting any type of fast action. And then it does have a flip-up screen so that the screen can actually flip up all the way into selfie mode, which may or may not be useful. You know, maybe if you're a vlogger, you like it, or maybe just for taking selfies, you'll like it for that. But when it actually comes to video quality, this is again where, kind of surprisingly, the Fujifilm might have an edge. Now internally, both cameras are shooting 8-bit, both are doing 4K, should be pretty similar. The Sony has S-Log, the Fuji has F-Log, but when it comes to shooting externally, the Fuji's the only one that can give you 10-bit out of that. So that's pretty cool. But I would give this a slight edge to the Fuji here, which is funny that we are living in a world where Fujis are outperforming Sonys for video. But all of this technology aside, the main reason to consider the X-T3 is still that unquantifiable essence of the Fujifilm X series. It's about the experience of taking pictures as much as the pictures themselves. There's a spiritual difference between the likes of Fuji and Sony, and neither is objectively better or worse. Fuji does have a lens selection that's exclusively focused on the APS-C format, and it includes many excellent fast and compact primes that Sony just can't match. But if you're thinking about upgrading to full frame one day, that might be one reason to go with a Sony and start building up your collection of full frame glass. Sony, of course, has full frame mirrorless cameras, Fujifilm does not. But no matter how you look at it, the X-T30 is a lot of camera for the money. In some ways, it shoots well above its class. And if you don't need the weather sealing or additional direct access control of the X-T3, then the X-T30 is honestly the better buy. Put the money you saved toward a good lens, and you'll be very happy with it. Hey, thanks for watching this video. I hope you liked it and that I didn't bore you too much with talk of tally lamps and video bit rates. If you did, go ahead and leave us a comment down below or hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos from Digital Trends. If you want to learn more about the Fujifilm X-T30, you can find our full in-depth review up now on digitaltrends.com. Thanks.